Famous musician forced a janitor to audition. However, she hit the note no one expected. Hey, you, don't walk away. Jeff Benny's voice cut through the Manhattan Civic Arena like a spotlight slicing through darkness. 6,000 heads turned in unison. On the live stream, 1.8 million viewers leaned closer to their screens, sensing something was about to break the carefully choreographed perfection of a sold-out concert. Lisa Carroll, 29 years old, stood frozen at the edge of the stage. Her hands were still damp inside yellow cleaning gloves. She had finished polishing the stage floor exactly 8 minutes earlier, moving quietly through the pre-show chaos the way she always did. Invisible, efficient, forgotten. I'm sorry, Mr. Benny, I didn't mean to interrupt. Come up here, Jeff said, not harshly, but with the kind of certainty that left no room for refusal. He gestured to center stage where the microphone stood waiting under lights so bright they could turn anyone into either a star or a cautionary tale. I want you to sing. A nervous ripple ran through the audience. Phones lifted, camera operators adjusted their angles. The band exchanged confused glances. Lisa shook her head instinctively, taking a step backward. Sir, I'm just cleaning. I know, Jeff replied, stepping closer. His expression wasn't mocking, but it wasn't gentle either. It was searching, as if he'd heard something in her voice that she didn't know she'd revealed. That's exactly why I'm asking. The air in the arena seemed to thin. 6,000 people held their collective breath, unsure whether they were about to witness an act of cruelty or something else entirely. Behind their screens, millions watched with the same electric uncertainty. Was this a publicity stunt, a humiliation, or something far more dangerous to predict? Jeff turned to the band and nodded. Give her Hallelujah, key of C, just the piano. He looked back at Lisa, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that stopped her from running. Not pity, but recognition. No pressure, Jeff said quietly, though his microphone carried the words to every corner of the arena. Just sing something you love. Show them what I heard backstage. Lisa's throat tightened. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. She looked out at the sea of faces, people who had paid hundreds of dollars to hear Jeff Benny. Not a woman whose name they didn't even know. But what Lisa didn't realize, what no one in that arena could possibly have known, was that the note she was about to hit would do more than shock a crowd. It would expose the very reason Jeff Benny's last 3 albums sounded flawless, despite his publicized vocal injuries. It would reveal why his management company had spent the past 6 months quietly auditioning ghost vocalists for studio sessions. And it would force Jeff to make a choice he'd been avoiding for 2 years, whether to protect his legacy or tell the truth. If you enjoy stories about hidden talent and unexpected redemption, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Because what comes after this moment will change both of their lives in ways neither of them saw coming. Don't forget to like and share this stories to inspire someone. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's continue. But the question is, why would a 4-time platinum artist risk his reputation by forcing a janitor onto his stage? What did Jeff Benny hear in those 8 minutes before the show that made him stop everything? To understand why this moment matters so much, we need to rewind time by 7 years. To when Lisa Carroll wasn't always invisible, and Jeff Benny wasn't yet carrying the weight of a lie he couldn't escape. 7 years earlier, in a quiet corner of upstate New York, Lisa Carroll was a girl who sang to herself while washing dishes. She would harmonize with the hum of the refrigerator in their small kitchen on Maple Street, finding melodies in the rhythm of running water, turning the mundane task of scrubbing pots into something that felt almost sacred. Her mother, Eleanor, would sometimes pause in the doorway just to listen, a soft smile crossing her tired face. You have a gift, sweetheart, Eleanor would say. But Lisa never thought of it as a gift. It was simply something she did when no one was watching, a private language between herself and the world, requiring no translation, no audience, no validation. Music wasn't a dream she chased. It was the air she breathed when life became too heavy to carry alone. Lisa's childhood home was modest, a 2-bedroom rental with creaking floors and windows that rattled in winter storms. Her father had left when she was 6, leaving behind only silence and a stack of unpaid bills. Eleanor worked double shifts at the local diner, her hands perpetually smelling of coffee and fryer grease, her smile growing thinner with each passing year. Lisa learned early that dreams were luxuries reserved for people who could afford them. So she sang quietly, in the shower, while folding laundry, during long walks home from school when the autumn leaves crunched beneath her boots and no one else was around to hear. She never joined the school choir. Too many eyes, too much expectation. She never auditioned for the community theater. Too much hope attached to something that felt too fragile to expose. Music was hers alone, and that made it safe. When Lisa turned 21, everything changed. Eleanor collapsed during her morning shift at the diner. The diagnosis came fast and merciless. Stage 3 lung cancer, aggressive, spreading. The doctors gave her 18 months, maybe 2 years with treatment that insurance barely covered, treatment that cost more than their combined yearly income. Lisa had been 2 semesters away from finishing her associate degree in library science, a quiet, practical path she'd chosen because it felt stable, manageable, real. She dropped out the same week her mother started chemotherapy. "You don't have to do this," Eleanor whispered from her hospital bed, her voice already weakened by the poison they were pumping into her veins to fight the poison already inside her. "I know," Lisa replied, holding her mother's hand, "but I want to." It wasn't entirely true. Lisa didn't want to abandon her education, didn't want to spend her early 20s working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on and the medication flowing. But want didn't matter anymore. Necessity did. She worked at a cafe in the mornings, a warehouse during the afternoons, and cleaned office buildings at night. She slept 4 hours if she was lucky. She sang less and less, her voice reserved only for the moments when her mother needed comfort. Soft lullabies in the dark, the same songs Eleanor had once sung to her. Eleanor lived for 19 months, long enough to see one more spring, long enough to tell Lisa she was proud of her, long enough to make Lisa promise she wouldn't stop living after she was gone. Lisa promised, but she didn't know how to keep it. After Eleanor died, Lisa moved to Manhattan, not for opportunity, not for reinvention, but because staying in that small upstate town felt like living inside a tomb. Every street corner held a memory. Every familiar face carried pity. She found work quickly. Custodial positions always needed filling. And Lisa had learned to be reliable, invisible, efficient. The Manhattan Civic Arena hired her within a week. The pay was steady. The benefits were decent. It was enough. Enough to survive. Enough to pay rent on a studio apartment in Queens. Enough to send occasional flowers to her mother's grave. Enough to forget she'd ever wanted anything more. Lisa's routine at the arena became its own kind of rhythm. She arrived at 6 p.m., just as the venue staff were setting up for evening events. She cleaned the backstage dressing rooms first, emptying trash bins, wiping down mirrors, vacuuming carpets. Then the stage itself, polishing the floors until they gleamed under the lights, checking for loose cables, ensuring everything was perfect for performers who would never know her name. And when the arena was empty, when the last crew member had left and the vast space echoed with silence, Lisa would allow herself to sing. Just a few notes. Nothing loud, nothing that would draw attention from the security guards making their rounds. She would hum while wiping down the piano, harmonize softly while coiling cables. Let her voice rise just enough to fill the emptiness around her, but never enough to be heard beyond the stage. Music had become something sacred again, but in a different way than before. It was no longer comfort, it was survival. A reminder that beneath the uniform and the exhaustion and the years of choosing practicality over hope, there was still something inside her that hadn't been erased. She never thought about performing, never imagined anyone hearing her. The idea of being seen, truly seen, terrified her more than anything else. Because if people saw her, they might expect something. And if they expected something, she might fail. And if she failed, it would confirm what she'd always suspected, that dreams were never meant for people like her. But tonight, Jeff Benny had heard her. And now Lisa stood under lights so bright they felt like exposure itself. 6,000 faces blurred into a single expectant mass. Millions more watching through screens she couldn't see. Jeff's voice came softly through the microphone. "Just breathe. You've already done the hard part. Lisa didn't know what he meant. She hadn't done anything yet. The pianist played the opening chords, slow, gentle, giving her space. Lisa closed her eyes. She didn't think about the crowd. She didn't think about Jeff. She thought about her mother's kitchen, about the way music had once made everything feel bearable, about the promise she'd made but never kept. Don't stop living. Lisa opened her mouth, and in that moment, under the lights of the Manhattan Civic Arena, she finally began to keep it. Jeff Benny wasn't born famous. That was the first thing he always told young artists who asked him for advice, their eyes wide with the kind of hunger he recognized because he'd once carried it himself. Fame wasn't birthright or destiny. It was built brick by brick, rejection by rejection, until one day you looked up and realized you'd constructed something so tall you could no longer see the ground. He grew up in South Philadelphia, in a neighborhood where music poured from open windows on summer nights. R&B, soul, old Motown records his grandmother played while cooking Sunday dinners. Jeff sang in the church choir, then at open mics in coffee shops that smelled like burnt espresso and unrealized dreams, then at small venues where the audience was outnumbered by empty chairs. He was 23 when Marcus Webb found him. Marcus was a producer who'd worked with legends, a man who could hear potential the way others heard finished songs. He'd walked into a half-empty bar in Brooklyn on a Tuesday night and heard Jeff sing a cover of Ain't No Sunshine with such raw ache that he'd stayed through the entire set. "You've got something," Marcus said afterward, sliding a business card across the sticky bar top. "But you need to decide if you want to be good or if you want to matter." Jeff didn't understand the distinction then. He learned it over the next decade. Marcus became more than a producer. He became a mentor, a father figure, a conscience. He taught Jeff that talent without purpose was just noise, that success without meaning is just ego dressed in expensive clothes, that the real measure of an artist wasn't how high they climbed, but how many hands they reached down to pull up with them. "You'll get your moment," Marcus told him during those early years when record labels kept passing, when doors kept closing, when it felt like the world was conspiring to keep him small. "And when you do, remember that somebody helped you get there. Remember that the only thing worth building is a ladder other people can climb too." Jeff got his moment at 27. His debut album went platinum. Then his second went double platinum. Then the tours, the awards, the magazine covers, the interviews where journalists asked him what success felt like, and he gave answers that sounded profound but felt increasingly hollow. By 35, Jeff Benny had everything he'd once dreamed of, and nothing that actually filled him. The music had become mechanical. The crowds had become expectations. The success had become a weight he carried on stage every night, performing not because he loved it anymore, but because millions of people needed him to be the version of himself they'd paid to see. Marcus had died 2 years earlier. Heart attack, sudden, no warning. And with him went the voice that had always reminded Jeff why any of this mattered in the first place. Jeff kept performing because he didn't know what else to do. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped listening for the thing that had made him fall in love with music in the first place. That raw, unpolished truth that could only come from someone who sang not for applause, but because staying silent would hurt more. Until he heard Lisa. It was 8 minutes before showtime. Jeff had been standing in the wings, going through his pre-show ritual, vocal warm-ups, breathing exercises, the careful mental preparation required to step into the spotlight and convince 6,000 people that he still believed in what he was selling. That's when he heard it. A voice, soft, almost inaudible, humming a melody he recognized, something old, something classic, something she was singing not for anyone else, but simply because it existed and she needed to let it out. Jeff stopped mid-breath. He'd heard thousands of voices. He'd worked with vocalists who could hit notes that defied physics, who'd trained for years to master technique, who'd studied at conservatories and performed on the world's biggest stages. This was different. Lisa's voice wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect, but it carried something none of those trained singers had. Honesty, pure, unfiltered, vulnerable honesty. The kind of truth that couldn't be taught or manufactured, that existed only in people who sang because they had to, not because they wanted something from it. Jeff had followed the sound to the stage, where he'd found her, a woman in a janitor's uniform, wiping down the piano, completely unaware that she was being heard. She stopped singing the moment she sensed his presence, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Don't stop," Jeff had said quietly. But she had. She'd apologized, gathered her cleaning supplies, and tried to disappear back into the shadows where she clearly felt she belonged. And in that moment, Jeff understood why Marcus had pushed him so hard all those years ago. It wasn't just about making music. It was about recognizing when something mattered and refusing to let it be buried by fear or circumstance or the world's cruel indifference to beauty that didn't announce itself loudly enough. Jeff made his decision in less than 30 seconds. He would stop the show. He would call Lisa out in front of everyone. He would force her onto the stage, not to humiliate her, but because some gifts were too important to leave hidden in the dark. He knew it might look cruel. He knew the audience might misunderstand. He knew Lisa herself might hate him for it. But he also knew that if he let her walk away, she'd spend the rest of her life cleaning stages while the voice inside her slowly suffocated under the weight of all the reasons she'd learned to stay silent. Jeff had built his career on stages like this. He'd been given chances by people who believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. And Marcus had been right. The only thing worth doing with success was using it to lift others. Now, standing center stage with Lisa trembling beside him, Jeff understood the parallel with perfect clarity. He had everything: fame, money, influence, the ability to fill arenas with people who knew his name. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost the thing that made any of it matter: the purpose, the meaning, the reason he'd started singing in the first place. Lisa had nothing. No career, no recognition, no audience. Just a uniform and a mop bucket and a voice she'd kept hidden for so long she'd almost convinced herself it didn't exist. But she carried something priceless. The exact thing Jeff had been searching for without knowing how to name it. The pianist played the opening chords. The audience held its breath. Jeff watched Lisa close her eyes, watched her shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath, watched her face shift from terror to something else, something like surrender, like finally letting go of the fear that had kept her invisible for so long. She opened her mouth, and Jeff raised his hand slightly, signaling the band to stay silent, to let her voice stand alone and unadorned, to give the audience nothing to hide behind and no reason to doubt what they were about to hear, because he knew what was coming. And he needed them to hear it exactly as he had: raw, true, and impossible to ignore. The first note came out barely above a whisper. Lisa's voice entered the silence like something fragile, testing the weight of air, tentative and small. She sang the opening line of Hallelujah so softly that the people in the back rows had to lean forward just to hear her, straining against the vastness of the arena as if they were trying to catch something that might disappear if they breathed too loudly. In the wings, a stagehand exchanged a glance with the lighting director. This felt like a mistake, like watching someone drown in public. But then something shifted. Lisa's voice steadied, not louder, but firmer, gaining confidence, not from the audience's attention, but from the melody itself, as if the song were reminding her of something she'd forgotten. The second line came clearer, more grounded, carrying a weight that made people stop checking their phones and start actually listening. The pianist followed her gently, giving her space, letting her lead, rather than trying to fill the gaps in her uncertainty. Jeff stood motionless at the edge of the stage, his eyes never leaving her face. He'd made the right call. He could feel it. The audience began to shift in their seats, not with discomfort anymore, but with attention. 6,000 people, collectively realizing that what they were hearing wasn't polished or practiced, but it was real in a way that most performances never managed to be. Lisa's eyes remained closed. She wasn't performing for them. She was somewhere else entirely. In her mother's kitchen, maybe. Or in those quiet moments late at night when the arena was empty and she'd let herself remember what it felt like to breathe music instead of just survive. The song built slowly, each line gaining strength from the one before it. Her voice opened up, revealing layers that had been compressed beneath years of silence. There was ache in it, and loss, and something else. Something like hope that had almost given up but hadn't quite managed to die. Then came the bridge, The melody climbed higher, demanding more, and asking Lisa to reach beyond where she thought she could go. The audience tensed, sensing the approach of something significant. Even people who didn't know music could feel it. The way the atmosphere in the arena changed, the way the air itself seemed to anticipate. Lisa's breath caught for just a moment, and then she let it go. The note came from somewhere deep and unguarded. It wasn't forced or strained. It didn't sound like someone trying to hit a high note. It sounded like the note had always existed inside her, and she was simply allowing it to surface, to become audible, to take up space in the world. The sound filled the arena like light breaking through a crack in heavy curtains, clear and pure and startlingly powerful. It soared above the piano, above the ambient noise of 6,000 people holding their breath, above every expectation anyone in that room had carried about what a janitor pulled on stage could possibly deliver. Jeff's expression changed instantly. His eyes widened. His hand moved unconsciously to his chest, as if the note had struck him physically. That was it. That was the sound he'd been chasing for 2 years. The sound he'd lost after his vocal injury. The sound that no amount of technical precision or studio production could manufacture. Raw, effortless beauty that couldn't be taught because it came from somewhere deeper than training. It came from truth. The note held for what felt like impossible seconds. Lisa's voice sustaining it without vibrato, without embellishment, letting it exist in its purest form. People in the audience felt it resonate in their chests, felt something inside them respond to it, the way tuning forks respond to each other across distances. Then, just as naturally as it had arrived, the note released. Lisa continued singing, returning to the lower register as if she hadn't just done something extraordinary. As if she didn't realize she'd just reached a place most trained vocalists spent careers trying to access. The song ended quietly. Lisa's voice descended back to a whisper, the final hallelujah, barely audible, but somehow more powerful for its softness. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. 6,000 people sat frozen, unsure if they were allowed to break whatever spell had just been woven. On the live stream, 1.8 million viewers stared at their screens, their comment sections momentarily still. Then someone in the third row started clapping. The sound broke the dam. Applause erupted like thunder, not the polite appreciation usually given to opening acts, but something deeper, more visceral. People rose to their feet. Some were crying without understanding why. Others simply stood there, stunned, trying to process what they just witnessed. Lisa's eyes snapped open. The lights hit her full force. The wall of sound from the audience crashed over her like a physical thing. Her face went pale. She'd done something wrong. She must have. Why else would they be reacting like this? Had she embarrassed herself? Embarrassed Jeff? She looked toward him desperately, searching for an escape route, her body already turning to flee. "Wait," Jeff said, stepping forward quickly. He raised his hand, and remarkably, the applause began to die down. 6,000 people quieted simply because Jeff Benny had asked them to. Lisa stood trembling, her yellow cleaning gloves still clutched in one hand, her face a mixture of terror and confusion. Jeff turned to her, his expression gentle but serious. "What's your name?" Lisa blinked. Of all the questions she'd expected, that wasn't one of them. Her voice came out hoarse. Lisa Carroll." "Lisa," Jeff repeated, as if testing the weight of it. He turned to the audience, his microphone capturing every word. "This is Lisa Carroll, remember that name?" He looked back at her, and for the first time since this ordeal began, Lisa saw something in his eyes that didn't feel like pity or spectacle. It felt like recognition, like respect. "You have no idea what you just did, do you?" Jeff asked quietly. Lisa shook her head mutely. Jeff smiled, not the practiced smile of a performer, but something genuine and almost sad. "You just sang the truth. That's the hardest thing anyone can do on a stage like this." The audience murmured in agreement. Lisa's hands were still shaking. Jeff took a breath, then made a decision that would change both of their lives irreversibly. "Lisa," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena, "would you sing one more song? With me this time?" Lisa stared at him. I can't." "You just did," Jeff said gently, and I'd be honored if you'd let me join you. The audience erupted again, but this time Lisa barely heard them. Because Jeff Benny, four-time platinum artist, voice of a generation, the man whose concerts sold out in minutes, was looking at her like she had something he needed. And for the first time in 7 years, Lisa felt something other than invisible. Lisa's mind raced with 1,000 reasons to say no. This was a trap. It had to be. People like Jeff Benny didn't just pull janitors onto stages out of genuine kindness. There was always an angle, always a camera ready to capture the moment when the nobody failed spectacularly, providing entertainment for millions who would forget her name by morning, but remember the humiliation forever. She'd seen it before. Viral videos of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary situations. Their fear and inadequacy packaged as content. Their dignity traded for clicks and shares in 30 seconds of manufactured emotion. "I don't think I should," Lisa said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the microphone clipped to her uniform collar. This is your show. I should go." Jeff's expression didn't change. He didn't look offended or impatient. He simply waited, giving her space to finish the thought she was struggling to articulate. "I'm not a performer," Lisa continued, the words tumbling out faster now. "I clean floors. I empty trash bins. I'm not supposed to be up here, and everyone knows it. And if I stay any longer, I'm just going to ruin something," Jeff finished gently. Lisa nodded, relief flooding through her that he understood. "Yes, exactly." "What if you've already made it better?" Jeff asked. Lisa stared at him, uncomprehending. Jeff turned slightly toward the audience, his voice carrying but still intimate, as if he were having a conversation meant only for her despite 6,000 witnesses. "Lisa, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't ask you up here because I thought it would be entertaining. I asked because I heard something real in your voice, and that's rare. Rarer than you think." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I'm not offering you a contract. I'm not asking you to quit your job or change your life or become someone you're not. I'm just asking if you'd share one more song with me. That's all. No strings, no pressure, just music." Lisa's throat tightened. The fear hadn't disappeared. It had simply shapeshifted into something else. Fear of being used was one thing. Fear of hope was far more dangerous. Because if she said yes, if she let herself believe even for a moment that this could be more than a strange accident, then she'd have to face the possibility that she'd spent 7 years bearing something that deserved to breathe. She'd have to admit that her mother had been right, that she did have a gift, and that choosing safety over that gift might have been the biggest mistake of her life. And if it all fell apart afterward, if this moment proved to be an anomaly rather than an awakening, the loss would devastate her in ways she wasn't sure she could survive. "Why?" Lisa whispered. "Why does it matter to you?" Jeff's smile was sad and knowing, "Because someone did the same thing for me once, and I promised I'd pay it forward." The song Jeff chose was "Lean on Me." Simple, classic, a song about support and community, about being there for each other when the weight became too heavy to carry alone. The audience recognized it immediately, a murmur of recognition rippling through the arena. Jeff began singing the first verse, his voice smooth and practiced, guiding Lisa into the melody with the ease of someone who'd performed it hundreds of times. The band joined in, gentle, supportive, giving them a foundation without overwhelming the intimacy. Lisa started the second verse tentatively, her voice still carrying the tremor of uncertainty. But this time something was different. This time she wasn't singing alone. Jeff's voice wove beneath hers, supporting without overpowering, lifting her when she faltered, giving her permission to take up space. The audience swayed. Phones stayed down. Something about this moment felt too sacred to interrupt with documentation. As they moved into the chorus together, Jeff did something unexpected. He stepped back. Not physically, he remained beside her on stage. But vocally, he pulled his voice back, letting Lisa take the lead. His harmony became quieter, more subdued, creating space for her to fill. Lisa felt the shift. Her eyes opened briefly, catching Jeff's encouraging nod. "This is yours. Take it." And slowly, carefully, Lisa did. Her voice grew stronger, not louder but more present, more willing to be heard. The ache that had characterized her first performance was still there, but now it was balanced with something else. A tentative courage, the sound of someone choosing to show up rather than disappear. The bridge arrived, and Jeff let Lisa sing it entirely alone. She didn't reach for another impossible high note. She didn't try to prove anything. She simply sang the words with the kind of honesty that made them mean something again, even though they'd been sung millions of times by thousands of voices. We all need somebody to lean on. Jeff watched her, and in that moment, the entire arena understood what they were witnessing. This wasn't a celebrity being charitable to a lucky nobody. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a carefully orchestrated moment of manufactured inspiration. This was one musician recognizing another, one human being seeing another's worth and refusing to let it remain hidden. The song ended with both of them singing together, equals, not star and discovery, but two people sharing the same truth. The applause this time was different, deeper, more thoughtful. People weren't just clapping for a good performance. They were acknowledging something that transcended entertainment. Jeff turned to Lisa as the applause continued. "Thank you," he said simply. Lisa's eyes were wet. "I don't understand what just happened." "You showed up," Jeff replied. "That's all. You showed up, and you were real, and that's enough." He gestured to the audience. "If you want to leave now, you can. No one will stop you. But if you want to stay, if you want to learn, to grow, to figure out what comes next, I'd like to help. Not as a manager or a producer, as someone who's been where you are and knows how hard it is to take the first step." Lisa looked out at the sea of faces, all of them looking back at her, not with pity, but with something close to respect. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You don't have to know," Jeff said. "You just have to be willing to try." Lisa stood there, caught between two versions of her life, the one she'd built carefully around survival and invisibility, and the one that was emerging now, terrifying and uncertain and alive with possibility. Before she could answer, Jeff's manager appeared in the wings, holding up a phone with an urgent expression. "Jeff," he called out, "you need to see this." By the time Lisa left the stage 20 minutes later, the videos had already spread across every platform. Clips of her first performance, close-ups of the high note, Jeff's face when he heard it, their duet, the moment he stepped back and let her lead. Millions of views, thousands of comments, hashtags trending worldwide. #Janitor singer and #the note. One expected Lisa Carroll. Lisa stood in the backstage hallway, staring at Jeff's manager's phone screen as the numbers climbed higher and higher, watching strangers dissect and celebrate and claim ownership of a moment that had felt so private just minutes earlier. "This changes things," Jeff's manager said, not unkindly. "People are going to want answers, interviews, follow-ups." Lisa felt the walls closing in. This was exactly what she'd feared. Exposure, expectation, the loss of control over her own story. Jeff appeared beside her, gently taking the phone and handing it back to his manager. "Give us a minute." When they were alone, Jeff spoke quietly. "You don't owe anyone anything. Not me, not them, not the people watching. You can walk away right now if you want. I'll handle the questions." Lisa looked at him. "And if I don't walk away?" Jeff smiled. "Then we figure it out together, at whatever pace you need." Lisa thought about her mother's promise. "Don't stop living." She took a breath. "Okay," she said. "Let's figure it out." By morning, Lisa Carroll was no longer just a person. She had become a story. The headlines wrote themselves across every entertainment and news site, each one competing to capture the narrative in the most clickable form. Janitor's voice stops concert, crowd dead. Jeff Benny discovers hidden talent in most unlikely place. The Cinderella moment that broke the internet. Lisa sat in her small Queens apartment, staring at her phone screen with the same disoriented confusion someone might feel waking up in a stranger's home. Her face, her actual face, was everywhere. Stills from the performance, zoomed in on the moment her eyes closed before hitting the high note, edited with dramatic lighting and captions that turned her private terror into inspirational content. The comments section of every video was a battlefield of projections. This is what happens when you don't give up on your dreams. She probably practiced for years in secret. Nothing is accidental. Jeff Benny is a saint for giving her this chance. Plot twist. She's actually a professionally trained singer, and this was all staged. Her mother must be so proud. That last comment made Lisa's chest tighten. Strangers were invoking her mother, a woman they knew nothing about, to construct narratives that fit their need for the story to mean something specific. Her phone vibrated constantly. Friend requests from people she'd never met. Messages from former classmates who hadn't spoken to her in a decade, suddenly claiming they'd always known she had talent. Reporters requesting interviews. A podcast host offering to feature her story. A motivational speaker asking if she'd be willing to share her journey from struggle to success. What journey? She'd sung 2 songs. She was still a janitor. Her bank account still had $847 in it. Her rent was still due in 12 days. Nothing had actually changed, except now millions of people thought they knew her. Lisa stopped going to work after the second day. Not because she'd quit, but because she couldn't face the arena. Couldn't face the stares from coworkers who now looked at her differently, their expressions oscillating between admiration and resentment. Couldn't face the stage where it had happened, now loaded with a significance she didn't know how to carry. She called in sick. Then she simply stopped answering calls altogether. Her supervisor left a voicemail. Concerned, not angry. "Lisa, we just want to know you're okay. Take whatever time you need." But Lisa didn't know how much time she needed because she didn't know what she was recovering from. The performance itself hadn't hurt her. The attention afterward was slowly suffocating her. On the third day, someone knocked on her door. Lisa considered not answering, but the knock came again, patient and persistent. She opened the door to find Jeff Benny standing in the hallway of her apartment building, wearing jeans and a plain jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He looked almost normal, just another person visiting a friend, if you didn't notice the black SUV parked on the street with tinted windows. "How did you find me?" Lisa asked. "Your supervisor gave me your address," Jeff said. "She's worried about you. So am I." Lisa stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment was small and sparse, clean but impersonal, the kind of space someone lived in without actually inhabiting. Jeff took it in without judgment. "You haven't been answering my messages," he said gently. "I know." Lisa closed the door. "I can't do this, Jeff. Whatever this is, I thought I could, but I can't." Jeff nodded slowly. "Can I ask what changed?" "Everything," Lisa said, her voice breaking slightly. "Everyone thinks they know me now. They're writing articles about my inspiring journey when they don't know anything about my life. They're calling me brave for doing something I never even chose to do. You put me on that stage. I didn't ask for any of this." The accusation hung in the air between them. Jeff didn't deflect. "You're right. I did put you on that stage, and I'm sorry if that's caused you pain. That wasn't my intention, but intention doesn't erase impact." Lisa sat down on her worn couch, exhausted. "What am I supposed to do now? Everyone expects something from me. They want me to be grateful, to be transformed, to turn this into some kind of success story. But I'm not transformed. I'm just scared." Jeff sat across from her in the only chair she had. "Then be scared. You don't owe anyone a narrative that isn't true." "But they're already writing it anyway," Lisa said, "with or without me." "That's the hard part about visibility," Jeff said quietly. "People project their own needs onto your story. They make you into whatever they need you to be. Inspiration, cautionary tale, proof that dreams come true, or that the system works, or that talent always wins. None of it is really about you. Then how do I stop it?" "You can't," Jeff said honestly, "but you can decide what parts of yourself you share and what parts you keep private. You can set boundaries. You can say no." Lisa looked at him. "To what?" "To everything," Jeff said. "To interviews you don't want to give, to performances you're not ready for, to advice from people who don't actually care about your well-being, to me if you want to." Over the next hour, Jeff taught Lisa something no one had ever taught her before, that kindness didn't require surrender. He showed her how to filter her social media, how to set her accounts to private, how to issue a simple statement through his publicist asking for privacy without having to explain herself. He helped her craft responses to the most persistent interview requests, polite but firm declines that didn't invite negotiation. "You don't owe anyone your story," Jeff repeated. "Not even the people who think they're helping by telling it for you." Lisa felt some of the pressure ease. "What about you? People think you discovered me, that you're my mentor now." "Do you want me to be?" Jeff asked. Lisa hesitated. "I don't know what I want. That's the problem." "Then take time to figure it out," Jeff said. "No one gets to rush you into clarity." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "There's a small community theater in Brooklyn. Very low-key, maybe 100 seats. They host open mic nights on Thursdays. No press, no cameras, just people who love music. If you want to sing again, on your terms, in your time, that might be a place to start." He wrote down the address on a piece of paper and left it on her counter. "You don't have to go," he added, "but if you do, go because you want to, not because anyone expects it." After Jeff left, Lisa sat in the silence of her apartment for a long time. The piece of paper with the theater address sat on the counter, simultaneously insignificant and terrifying. Thursday was in 4 days. She could go. She could not go. She could decide that night, or the morning of, or 30 seconds before it started. The choice was hers. For the first time since stepping onto Jeff Benny's stage, Lisa realized that was actually true. The world might have opinions about what she should do next, but they couldn't force her to perform. They couldn't make her into something she wasn't ready to be. She picked up her phone and looked at the blocked messages, the declined interview requests, the filtered notifications. They would still be there tomorrow, but they didn't have to define her. Lisa opened her notes app and typed a single question. "Do I want to sing again?" She stared at the words for a long time. Then slowly she began to write her answer. Lisa's answer came in the form of a question she hadn't expected to ask herself. "Do I want to sing again?" She'd started writing and couldn't stop. The words poured out, not polished or profound, but honest. She wrote about her mother, about the years of silence, about the fear that had kept her small. She wrote about the sun and the lights and the moment when she'd opened her mouth and remembered what it felt like to be fully alive. And at the end she wrote, "Yes, but not like that. Not for applause, for something else." The problem was she didn't know what something else meant. Thursday came. Lisa didn't go to the open mic. Instead, she went back to work at the arena. Her supervisor welcomed her back without questions, just relief that she was okay. Lisa returned to her routines, cleaning dressing rooms, polishing floors, moving through spaces where music happened without being part of it. But something had shifted. The silence didn't feel the same anymore. On Friday, Lisa received a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Lisa. This is Marcus Chen. I'm a volunteer coordinator at St. Augustine's homeless shelter in the Bronx. Jeff Benny gave me your contact. We host a community dinner every Saturday evening, and sometimes people sing or share music afterward. No performance, no pressure, just neighbors sharing space. If you're ever interested in joining us, we'd love to have you. No obligation at all." Lisa stared at the message for a full minute. This wasn't a stage. It wasn't an audience. It was just people. People who weren't expecting anything from her because they didn't know who she was. She replied before she could talk herself out of it. "I'll be there tomorrow." St. Augustine's shelter was housed in a converted church in the South Bronx. The main hall smelled like vegetable soup and industrial detergent. About 60 people sat at long tables. Families, elderly men and women, young adults who looked hollowed out by circumstances Lisa could only imagine. Volunteers moved between tables, serving food, refilling water cups, offering quiet conversation to anyone who wanted it. Marcus Chen found Lisa near the entrance. He was in his 40s, with kind eyes and the calm demeanor of someone who'd learned to hold space for suffering without being consumed by it. "Lisa," he said warmly, "thank you for coming. Jeff mentioned you might be interested in sharing music, but please, no pressure. You can just be here if you'd like." Lisa nodded, relieved. "I'd like to just observe tonight, if that's okay." "Of course." She helped serve dinner, wiping down tables, refilling coffee. The work felt familiar, grounding. No one recognized her. No one asked for her story. She was simply another volunteer, useful and unremarkable. After dinner, Marcus stood and invited anyone who wanted to share something, a song, a poem, a story, to come to the front. A few people volunteered. An older man recited a prayer in Spanish. A teenage girl read a poem about her grandmother. A volunteer with a guitar played Blowin' in the Wind, and several people sang along quietly. Then a woman raised her hand. She was maybe 50, her face weathered, her clothes clean but worn. "I don't have anything prepared," she said. "But could someone sing something hopeful? It's been a hard week." The room went quiet. The guitar volunteer looked uncertain, flipping through mental catalogs of songs that might fit. Lisa felt something tug inside her chest. Before she could overthink it, she stood. "I can sing something, if that's okay." Marcus smiled gently. "Please." Lisa walked up at the front. No microphone, no stage. Just a room full of people who were tired and hungry and hoping for a moment of peace. She sang "You Are My Sunshine," her mother's favorite. The song she'd sung to her mother during those final months, the melody that had carried them both through unbearable loss. Her voice was soft at first, almost conversational. But as she moved through the verses, something opened in the room. People stopped shifting in their seats. A child who'd been fussing quieted. The woman who'd requested the song closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. Lisa wasn't performing. She was offering something. A small gift, a moment of shared humanity, a reminder that beauty still existed even when everything else felt broken. When she finished, there was no applause. Just a few quiet thank yous and the sound of people returning to their conversations, slightly softer than before. The woman who'd made the request approached Lisa afterward. "Thank you," she said simply. "I needed that more than you know." Lisa felt something shift in her chest, something that had been clenched tight for years beginning to loosen. This was what something else meant. Over the next 6 weeks, Lisa began singing in places that didn't look like stages. Marcus connected her with a children's hospital, where young patients spent weeks recovering from surgeries and illnesses that kept them separated from normal childhood. Lisa sang in their rooms, Disney songs, soft lullabies, anything they requested. She watched their faces relax, their breathing slow, their fear temporarily suspended. A teacher at an underfunded elementary school in Harlem invited her to visit during music class. Lisa sang with second graders who'd never had formal music education, teaching them harmonies by ear, watching their eyes light up when they discovered they could make something beautiful together. She returned to St. Augustine's every Saturday, becoming a regular presence. People started requesting songs. A young mother asked her to sing at her daughter's birthday celebration held in the shelter's community room. An elderly veteran requested "What a Wonderful World," because it reminded him of his late wife. Lisa discovered something she'd never known about her voice. It wasn't just for her. It carried something that could reach people in their loneliness, their pain, their brief moments of joy. Not because she was technically perfect, but because she was willing to be present with them. Music wasn't a dream anymore. It was service. Jeff watched Lisa's transformation from a careful distance. She texted him occasionally, photos from the hospital, updates about the shelter, questions about vocal technique when she encountered challenges. He answered when asked, but mostly he stayed out of her way, letting her find her own path. But something was changing in him too. Jeff had spent 2 years performing songs that no longer moved him, filling arenas because that's what successful artists did, maintaining a brand that felt increasingly hollow. Watching Lisa rediscover purpose reminded him of why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. Marcus had been right all those years ago. The point wasn't to climb higher, it was to bring others along. Jeff began quietly funding music programs in underserved schools. He started showing up at community centers, offering informal workshops, teaching kids who couldn't afford professional lessons. He stopped doing interviews about his awards and started talking about the artists he was mentoring, the programs he supported, the ways success could be measured in impact rather than fame. His management team thought he was committing career suicide. Jeff thought he was finally waking up. 3 months after the night at the arena, Jeff called Lisa. There's something I want to run by you, he said. No pressure, just an idea. What is it? The arena wants to do a benefit concert. All proceeds going to music programs in public schools and community health centers. I'm headlining, but I want it to be different. Not just me performing, a collaboration. Local artists, community choirs, people whose voices don't usually get heard. He paused. I'd like you to be part of it. Not as my discovery or a viral story, but as yourself. As someone who understands what music can do beyond entertainment. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Would it be a big production? It can be whatever you want, Jeff said. You can sing one song or 10. You can perform solo or with others. You can even decline, and I'll understand completely. But I think you're ready. And I think it matters that people see what music looks like when it's done for the right reasons. Lisa thought about the children in the hospital, the families at the shelter, the second graders who'd learned to harmonize. Can I think about it? She asked. Take all the time you need. That night, Lisa stood in her apartment and looked at herself in the mirror. She wasn't the same woman who'd been pulled onto a stage 3 months ago. She wasn't invisible anymore, but she also wasn't defined by visibility. She'd found something more valuable than fame. Purpose. Lisa picked up her phone and texted Jeff. I'll do it, but on one condition. I want the community choir from St. Augustine's to sing with me. Jeff's response came immediately. Perfect. Let's give them a stage they deserve. Lisa smiled. Then she began preparing for the first performance she'd actually chosen. The Manhattan Civic Arena looked exactly the same. Same steel rafters reaching toward the ceiling. Same rows of seats stretching back into shadow. Same stage where Lisa had once stood trembling in yellow cleaning gloves, certain she was about to humiliate herself in front of millions. But Lisa Carroll was different now. She stood in the wings wearing simple black, not a costume, just clothing that let her move and breathe. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup artist had touched her face. She looked like herself, and that felt like enough. Beside her, 15 members of the St. Augustine's community choir waited nervously. Marcus stood among them, offering quiet encouragement. These were people who'd spent months singing together in a converted church basement, not for audiences, but for each other. Tonight would be the first time most of them had ever stood on a professional stage. You okay? Marcus asked Lisa. She nodded. Yeah, I think I actually am. The arena was full, not quite sold out, but close. 6,000 people who'd come not just to see Jeff Benny, but to witness something the promotional materials had described as an evening of music as service. Proceeds would fund arts programs in 20 schools and 3 community health centers across New York. Jeff had performed the first half of the concert, a stripped-down set, just him and his guitar, singing songs that mattered to him rather than songs designed to top charts. The audience had responded with something quieter than usual enthusiasm, something closer to respect. Now it was Lisa's turn. Jeff's voice came through the backstage speaker. There's someone I'd like to bring out, someone who reminded me why any of this matters. Lisa Carroll. The applause was warm but uncertain. People remembered the viral videos, but they weren't sure what to expect now that the novelty had worn off. Lisa walked onto the stage alone. The lights were softer than she remembered. She could actually see faces in the front rows. Real people, not an anonymous mass. She found the microphone at center stage, the same one she'd stood before 3 months ago. But this time, she'd chosen to be here. Hi, Lisa said simply. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm going to sing a song my mother loved. It's for anyone who's ever felt invisible. The arena quieted. Lisa closed her eyes, not from fear this time, but from focus. She thought about her mother's kitchen, about the children in the hospital, about the woman at the shelter who'd asked for something hopeful. She began singing Hallelujah. Her voice entered the space with confidence she hadn't possessed before. Not loud or showy, but grounded and clear. She moved through the verses deliberately, letting each word carry its weight, trusting the melody to hold the truth she was offering. The audience listened differently than they had 3 months ago. No phones rose to capture the moment. People simply sat, present and attentive, allowing themselves to be moved. Then came the bridge, the moment where the song climbed toward that impossible note, the one that had shocked a crowd and changed her life. Lisa didn't hesitate. She didn't brace herself or hope she'd get lucky. She simply sang it. The notes soared clean and effortless, filling every corner of the arena with the same crystalline purity it had carried before. But this time it wasn't accidental or surprising. It was intentional. It was hers. The audience felt the difference. This wasn't a janitor stumbling into unexpected talent. This was an artist claiming her voice. When the note released and Lisa returned to the final verse, something in the arena shifted. People weren't watching a performance anymore. They were witnessing something sacred, the sound of someone fully inhabiting their truth. Lisa sang the final hallelujah softly, letting it fade into silence. No one moved. Then, from the wings, Jeff appeared. He walked onto the stage, carrying his guitar, his expression full of quiet pride. He positioned himself slightly behind Lisa, giving her space to remain the focal point. "May I?" he asked gently. Lisa smiled. "Please." Jeff began playing, and together they started the final song. The song they sang together was "Lean on Me," the same one they'd performed 3 months ago when Lisa had been terrified and uncertain, when every note felt like walking a tightrope without a net. Now her voice wove with Jeff's in easy harmony, neither leading nor following, but moving together like two streams joining into a single current. The St. Augustine's choir joined them for the final chorus, their voices filling the arena with the kind of imperfect, heartfelt sound that no professional ensemble could replicate. 15 people who'd learned to sing not in conservatories, but in a shelter basement, standing on a stage they'd never imagined reaching, proving that music belonged to everyone willing to open their mouths and let it out. The audience rose to their feet, not with the explosive energy of viral entertainment, but with the slow, reverent acknowledgement of witnessing something true. When the final note faded, Jeff stepped back, applauding Lisa and the choir. He made sure every camera in the arena was pointed at them, not at him. "Thank you," he said into his microphone, "for reminding me what this is supposed to be about." The media coverage the next day was different from the first time. The headlines weren't about discovery or Cinderella stories. They were about community, about music as service, about the ways art could heal rather than just entertain. Jeff Benny and Lisa Carroll proved success isn't about fame, it's about impact. Community choir from Bronx Shelter brings down the house at benefit concert. When music becomes ministry, the story of Lisa Carroll's quiet revolution. Record labels reached out to Lisa immediately. Offers for album deals, touring opportunities, management contracts that promised to turn her into the next big thing. Lisa declined them all, not out of fear this time, but out of clarity. She'd spent 3 months discovering what her voice was actually for, and it wasn't for building a brand or chasing charts. It was for reaching people in their loneliness, their pain, their need for connection. Instead, Lisa did something else. 6 months after the benefit concert, the Voices Heard community music program opened in the South Bronx. It was modest, a rented space in a community center, donated instruments, volunteer instructors. Lisa ran it with Marcus's help, offering free music classes to anyone who wanted them. Children whose schools had cut arts funding, adults who'd always wanted to learn but couldn't afford lessons, people from the shelter who needed a place to express themselves without judgment. Lisa taught them not just technique, but purpose. She showed them that music wasn't about perfection or commercial success. It was about having something to say and finding the courage to say it. She still worked part-time at the Manhattan Civic Arena, not because she needed to financially. The benefit concert and a modest teaching salary covered her expenses, but because she chose to. The janitorial work kept her grounded, reminded her where she'd come from, connected her to the reality most people lived in. Some of her former coworkers thought she was crazy. "You could be famous," they said. "You could be making real money." But Lisa had learned that real money meant different things to different people, and fame had never been the point. Jeff Benny's career shifted in the months that followed. He still performed, still recorded music, still filled arenas when he toured. But he did it differently now. Every concert included emerging artists, community performers, people whose voices deserved amplification. He used his platform not to elevate himself, but to create space for others. In interviews, he talked less about his own achievements and more about the musicians he was mentoring, the programs he was funding, the ways success could be measured and lives changed rather than albums sold. Lisa Carroll saved my career, he told Rolling Stone in an interview 9 months after their first performance together. Not by singing with me, but by showing me what music is actually for. I'd forgotten. She reminded me. The interviewer asked if he felt like he'd discovered her. Jeff smiled. No, I just stopped long enough to listen. Lisa was always there, always singing. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to hear her. He paused. And the truth is, she discovered me. Or at least, she discovered the person I was supposed to be. 2 years after the night Lisa Carroll was pulled onto a stage in yellow cleaning gloves, she stood in that same arena at 11 p.m., finishing her shift. The evening's concert had ended hours ago. The audience had left. The crew had packed up the equipment. The building was silent except for the hum of industrial lights and the distant sound of traffic. Lisa pushed her cleaning cart across the stage, wiping down the microphone stands, checking for debris. She worked quietly, efficiently, the way she always had. And then, without thinking about it, she began to hum. Softly at first. A melody that had been running through her head all day. Something new, something she was still figuring out. Her voice grew slightly stronger, filling the empty arena with sound that no one would hear, that wasn't meant for anyone but herself. Except someone did hear it. A young woman, one of the new janitorial staff, maybe 19 or 20, paused at the edge of the stage. She'd been taking out trash bags, moving invisibly through the building the way Lisa once had. She stood there listening, her expression shifting from surprise to something else. Recognition, maybe, or hunger. The look of someone who'd been carrying something private and precious, thinking no one would ever notice or care. Lisa finished her melody and looked up, noticing the young woman for the first time. Sorry, the woman said quickly. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Lisa smiled. You weren't eavesdropping. I was just singing. The young woman hesitated. You're really good. Thank you, Lisa said. Then gently, do you sing? The woman's face flushed. Just sometimes, when I'm alone, nothing serious. Lisa recognized that tone, the practiced dismissal, the fear of being seen, the belief that some gifts were meant to stay hidden. She set down her cleaning cloth and walked to the edge of the stage. Would you mind if I heard something? Just a few notes. Whatever you'd like. The young woman looked terrified. I'm not trained or anything. Neither was I, Lisa said. She extended her hand, not pulling, not forcing, just offering. The young woman stared at that hand for a long moment. Then slowly she took it. Some voices don't need permission. They only need to be heard.